I know so many people my age and younger who are dealing with anxiety, right? And I've never heard anxiety be proffered as much as I've heard it in the last 2 years of my existence on this planet. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who are watching this program tonight who either dealing with anxiety or know someone who happens to be dealing with it. What advice would you give to people? I don't know the different kinds of anxiety and different reasons, but generally speaking, how should people manage anxiety?
So what I would say is that going back, thinking historically, like what is the shift? Are you saying that previously you didn't see it and now we know so many individuals? Again, I think it's that double-edged sword of our prosperity, right? That we've prospered, we've come so far that our focus has shifted and the things that we can think about or focus on has shifted. So previously, 20 years ago, the Black community was truly in survival mode. And so although we still have a lot of things to overcome, there was a survival mode. So when you're in survival mode, you don't think about the future, right? It's like, I need to eat today. Is my job going to be there today and tomorrow? Right. And so anxiety, the hallmark of anxiety is worry about the future. It is a focus on things that have not occurred as if they have. And so historically, we didn't have an option. We didn't have the opportunity to think about, am I going to have, am I going to get that promotion 6 months from now? It's like, what is my check going to be on the 1st or the 15th? And will it cover everything?
Right.
And so one of the primary ways to manage that is doing things like techniques like mindfulness. Stay in the present. What do you have control over in this moment? And even if that's just your breath, to focus on that. But we can't, anxiety, living in the future, depression, living in the past. How do we focus on living in the moment?
Say that again.
So anxiety is that living in the future, and depression is focusing on the past. So how do we learn to stay in the moment? How do we learn to be present and to be mindful of where we are at this moment?
What's so rich about that, Dr. Grant, is that I was talking to my son, and he was going through his, future worries, and I said, it hasn't happened yet.
Right.
I mean, nothing has happened.
Right.
You're building all this up. You're making me anxious. But human beings do that all the time, do we not?
Yeah.
And is it built into the framework of our psychology, or here's a better question. Are there a certain set of psychological issues or challenges that are unique to the Black community?
Yes. What you mentioned a little while ago was this concept that we call catastrophizing, and humans in general have the ability to make a catastrophe or to predict a catastrophe surrounding several things. What becomes unique with Black folk is that not only do we experience the general stressors of the world like everybody else does, we also experience this kind of race-based stress that everybody else doesn't experience, right? There's 3 different types of racism. There's interpersonal racism, there's structural or systemic racism, and then there is I lost the last one. Interpersonal racism, structural racism. It'll come to me in a minute. So these pieces, they add on to the stressors that we feel. And right now they're doing stress tests on cortisols in our blood and our bodies. They're now doing hair tests. And now we're looking at compound stress, meaning that if you took a blood sample or a urine sample, that gives you a moment of stress over the last 3 or 4 hours. Hair samples, hair cortisol samples are now testing years of stress, compound stress. And so what we're dealing with is...
Don't lose your train of thought. So we carry stress in our hair?
It comes out in our hair. The cortisol is the hormone in our blood that demonstrates stress. Everything we feel has a biological basis. And when we feel stress, it's because we've had this cortisol buildup. Historically, we've only been able to study that through fluids. Now we're able to look at hair samples for those of us who have hair and are able to measure the amount of cortisols that have been released on that hair follicle to say, wow, this individual has been under this many years of consistent, overwhelming stress. And so when we talk about how our lives and our experiences are different, they're hugely different. and we're experiencing a weight that others are not experiencing. And this doesn't matter if you have money, if you don't, if you're heterosexual, homosexual, it don't matter. All of us, just by virtue of our membership in the African diaspora, living in Euronormative lands, we experience a different type of stress.
I'm gonna slap him with this card.
Yeah.
Isn't that clapping? Y'all should be clapping for that. That's good. Dr. Holmes, you done brought one tonight, boy.
I told you.
Yes, Dr. Donald. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. So let me ask you this. Give me both of them. This is for both of you. Give me some mental health practices that all of us should incorporate, no matter where you are on the anxiety spectrum, depression, single, married. All of us should have these practices as part of our mental health.
It's a good question. The first thing that comes to mind is, now self-care is a buzzword.
Right,
Self-care,
right.
What does that mean? Okay, I'm gonna take a trip to Fiji one day. No. One mental health skill, strategy, or tool from my perspective that everyone should practice should be time for yourself. That there should be some time for yourself, not taking care of anyone else or any other responsibilities, but time where you can do what relaxes you, that gets you back centered and focused and aware of you, how you're feeling, what you're thinking, what you desire, that you can reflect, and whatever that time looks like. I know a lot of times in the circles that I run, people are like, oh my God, yoga is the most calming thing. And I'm like, I hate yoga. I can't do downward dog. I'm not a pine tree. I'm like, it gives me so much stress.
I was just about to say yoga.
I'm not yoga, but I love Zumba because I love to dance and move.
Yeah.
So, but whatever that time, for some it might be quiet time and quiet space. For others, it might be, listening to, some P-Funk or something like that.
Right.
But time that you take out for yourself and that you schedule it. If we look at our schedules, oftentimes we have everything that we need to do for our children, for our spouse, our partner, for our church, for whatever. And we never have ourselves written on our calendar.
I said to someone recently, and they thought I was joking, I said that our phones are killing us. We don't even realize it, but our phones are killing us.
Yeah.
Give me one practice. Apparently not yoga.
I'm gonna expand that to physical activity.
Okay.
There's only 3 ways in which we physiologically release stress from our bodies. 3 fluids. It's urine, blood, and perspiration. The one thing that we find,
urine, blood,
and perspiration,
okay.
it physiologically releases the hormone that makes us feel stress from our bodies. I think we don't put enough emphasis on physical activity. Dr. Holmes was just talking about Zumba. I try to do yoga twice a week. You can go hiking, you can run, but you're literally already in an environment where you are receiving a disproportionate burden of the world's stressors. And if you already know that, taking time and making it physical, and reading is great, all those things are great, but we need to increase our physical activity because the 3 things that we die from the most can be combated by physical activity. Heart disease, diabetes, and strokes. If we ran twice a week, we reduce stress and we reduce the risk factors of our most deadliest diseases. And so for me, it's physical activity because it gives you mindfulness, it allows you some space and time, and you sweat.
That's rich. That's rich. And I'm hoping that everybody watching and everybody in this audience has a deeper sense of what it is you're trying to get us to do. Now I want you to give some practical advice on some particular things, but I'm going to ask you one more general question before we drill down. Religion, right? The church, the pastor. We even have a poll question tonight, and one of the poll questions tonight, and I want all the viewers to go on the app, go on the site, and be a part of this poll. Is who helps you when you have emotional issues? A, your religious leader. B, a psychiatrist. C, a friend. D, a family member. E, absolutely nobody. Answer that question tonight. I'd like to hear what you're thinking and who actually is helping you walk through it. But let's do this. What is it about Black folks in church and religion that we run to the preacher or we run to the church when we should be coming to you?
You answer that first.
Somebody call my grandma, make sure she ain't watching before I start talking. I wrote an article for Ebony Magazine years ago called Black Suicide When Prayer's Not Enough. And we don't go to our minister for our insulin, right? You got diabetes, you don't go say, Reverend Johnson, can I get a re-up on my insulin?
Right.
You don't do that. And so one of the problems is that we have been convinced that mental wellness is not equally as important as somatic or physical wellness. And what we have to do, and it's part of our role as professionals in this field and you as a journalist, to make sure that Black folk are understanding that this is just as serious as a heart attack, as a stroke, as diabetes. And so we have to do a better job at increasing the knowledge on the gravity of it. But we also have to pay homage to a lot of churches who now have therapy ministries, who now have professional clinicians who are working in the church because they've seen that need. And I know some of your work is in that space. And so there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. But there's a lot more to be done. There's a lot more to be done. But I know Dr. Holmes is very immersed in that space.
I think that it's a both and there has historically been a split between religion and psychology. And so religion rejecting psychology because it's not the truth. Because it's not God's truth. That's been a historical split. And psychology rejecting religion because it's not scientific. So there's been a historical split. And within the African American church, I think that for so long, just historically in this country, the only resource that African Americans had was the church. So, you know, I do work in a major church, and when you look at some of the literature, there were 5 historic roles of the church, and really it served as the first social service organization before we had access, right? So for food, for family, and so the church became that. When mental health services became accessible across the country, African Americans were still kind of outside of the sphere of being able to access them because of finances, right? And insurance. Now what's happened? Now that's gotten better. However, when you look at the number of African Americans who are either doctoral level psychologists, clinicians, psychiatrists, when I was in graduate school it was 2%. Now it's 4%. And a lot of African Americans want to go to a therapist who looks like them. There's a face validity, right? They believe I can connect and you'll understand me. So, I know many African Americans who have gone and felt that they were not understood from a cultural perspective. So now that we have more access financially, now there aren't as many culturally competent or sensitive or clinicians practicing with cultural humility where we feel comfortable going. So it's a double-edged sword.
The reality is the pattern is already ingrained because we're so used to going to the church. I think your insights on that are fascinating and remarkable. Now, I'm gonna put you all to work. Now, if you're doing the poll, put the poll thing back up on the thing so I can read the thing. If you're doing the if you're doing the poll, go to foxhole.tv/vote. Because I really want to know where it is you get your mental health advice. And if you're not getting it from people like this, I don't know. I don't know. So please go to foxhole.tv/vote. All right, put you to work now. You ready?
All right, let's go.
All right. So I'm asking each of you to take one of these, and we'll do a round robin. All right. Give me what you would give the best advice, Dr. Donald, for someone who's dealing with an insecure person.
For someone who they're not insecure,
they're dealing with someone.
Oh yeah. Oftentimes, and it's going to be a very ambiguous answer, so please receive it. Oftentimes, we attract those individuals based on many of the characteristics that we have. And so it's kind of this projective thing, right?
Facts.
And so when you have this person, the first thought that comes to me is when you have this person who's dealing with an insecure person, my first thought is to ask them about their own insecurities. as they're attempting to figure out this other insecure person. Now, if they're mentoring this person or supporting this person in a different way, and it's not a relationship where they're able to say, oh, well, maybe I drew this insecure person because I'm insecure and I don't want to acknowledge my own insecurities. If they're supporting somebody else who has some insecurities, you got to give people successes. I think about kids, and there's this concept called scaffolding, right? And so when you have a scaffold around a building, you put the scaffold up so you can build one part, and if it's not done, you can go to the top and start to build more. We have to build bridges for people to feel successful, particularly black people who are consistently getting beat down in so many areas. And so
let me see if I can boil it down. What I hear you saying is, when you're dealing with an insecure person, one of the best ways to deal with that, first, is to look at yourself, but secondly, to put them in a position where they can feel like they're winning.
Where they get opportunities, examples of success, what we call corrective emotional experience.
Okay, you ready? I got you.
All right.
All right. So give me the best advice for someone who won't commit.
Won't commit.
For dealing with someone who won't commit.
In a relationship,
In a
like
relationship,
in an intimate relationship, leave.
All right. Dr. Donald, your turn. Dr. Donald, your turn.
Looks like I'm going to make my answers a little shorter.
I'm going to get to the audience in a second. I'm good.